Hello and welcome along to the Property Academy podcast by Opus Partners. I'm your host, Seb McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
And today on the show, we're talking about the old versus the new Kiwi Dream. That includes how the Kiwi Dream has changed, what it actually is, and what most Kiwis want from their future based on the hundreds of investors that we've worked with between Andrew and myself. And how do you go about creating your own Kiwi Dream? Now, Andrew, when we talk about the Kiwi Dream, what do we really mean by that?
I guess what we're meaning is what people aspire to and what they think is success, or what success looks like to them. And I do think that that's changed quite drastically over time. You know, what my parents' definition of success was, or what they were aspiring to, what they were going to work every day for, is quite different from probably people that are our age.
And if we think about the old Kiwi Dream, so maybe what your parents' generation might have wanted, what did that kind of look like?
So it was always a kind of a quarter-acre section. That was the standard Kiwi Dream. I want a quarter-acre. What's that? 1,000 square meters?
About 1,000 square meters.
1,000 square meters. Okay, I want that. I want a white picket fence. I want a weatherboard home until I've got a weatherboard home and have to pay the maintenance for it. That's what I want. I want it paid off, and I want to send my kids to probably a good school, and maybe have fish and chips every now and then.
And retire at 65 with the mortgage fully paid off.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, if you still want that. But that was typically a really good definition of success. And if I think about even like some people, like my parents, they'd get the lawnmower out, my dad, and they'd paint stripes. Not paint, they'd mow stripes into the ground, right?
Yeah.
Mow one way, mow the next, and you know how you get that perfect crisscross there.
Yeah. I've seen my gardener do that.
Andrew Nicol. And that's what they'd kind of go for. And I think as we move on to today, I remember we actually had a quarter-acre section when I was... Yeah, this is because I grew up in South Taranaki where property prices are like among the lowest in the country. And I remember it was just mum and us 4 kids. It was an absolute hassle, actually, to manage.
Imagine, were the lawns always long?
Yes.
Once your dad left you? You said your dad mowed the lawn. That's all I meant.
Well, then we ended up doing it, actually.
You did?
Yeah. My brother William and I.
Oh, yeah, handsome William.
Yeah, the one you think's quite a looker.
I mean, you're very different.
Andrew Nicol. And I remember we'd take turns, but I remember once he just left it for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. I reckon they were very high.
Hard to go back from that.
I think it took me 2 hours to mow it after that, but I earned $50, which was a lot of money.
$50?
Yeah.
Your mum paid you $50?
I think it was. I mean, unless it's just got inflation in my head and it was really 20 or something.
50, yeah. There's no way
probably
it was $50.
20. But it was basically, we had 2 backyards, really. Like, you had a backyard and then you had the other backyard, because a quarter-acre section is quite... No, it was, because it was kind of in sections. But a quarter-acre section is so large that it was a real hassle to maintain all of the gardens. And I think that actually leads in to...
Why you don't like physical labour?
I can get physical, Andrew. You'll see me get physical if you don't.
For $50 an hour, I hope
so. And just before we get, that's quite a good one, actually. I'll give you that. And just before we get into kind of the new Kiwi Dream, it's important to kind of understand, like, sometimes we hear about the American Dream as well. And I think it's quite different from the Kiwi Dream. When I think about the American Dream, it's more about an aspiration towards wealth, and this idea that no matter where you come from, if you put in enough hard work, you can be really, really successful. And I mean, we're talking generally in just how we view things at the moment, but when I think about the American Dream, it's a lot more about material success and being really, really wealthy. I think the Kiwi Dream is much more about a balance between work and life, and just living a really good life, doing well financially, but also enjoying it as you go along.
Yeah, I think that's true. And if I think about, the investors I work with day in and day out, one of the key parts of my role is figuring out, okay, what are your goals and how are we going to get you there? And when I ask people what their goals are, they're similar to what, again, my parents' generation might have wanted, but a little bit different. So retiring comfortably, absolutely, that's a goal. When it is quite different. So previously, you'd worked to 65. There was kind of no questions about it, because that's when your pension kicked in. And there wasn't KiwiSaver for my parents' generation, previous, if you're retiring, 30 years ago, there wasn't a KiwiSaver, so you just got the superannuation. So you had to have your house paid off and you had to maybe save a little bit of money. Nowadays, people tend to want to either stop working or at least ease back working well before 65. So if I meet someone in their 30s, I guarantee you they want to stop working in the next 20 years. So in their 50s, say mid-50s. Now, challenge with that is not just are you retiring sooner, but also you're probably going to live longer than your parents did or the previous generation did. And so therefore you've got a much greater time in those retirement years. And so you've got to do a whole lot more planning to be able to make that financially sustainable. So key difference there is the time frame in which you're going to be retired is changed quite drastically.
Yeah, and I think that first way how the Kiwi Dream has changed is that idea of financial freedom faster. Now, when people talk about, I want to be financially free at 50, or I want to be able to stop working at 50, for a lot of people, that doesn't mean that they want to give up work altogether and then go traveling the world. But they want the ability to, if I'm 50 years old and I really don't like my boss, I want the ability to quit my job, take a year off, and then come back to it later and have the ability to choose who I work for, whether I work for myself or not, and when and the nature of how I work. I don't want to feel like I have to keep doing this just to keep paying the mortgage.
Yeah, I'll give you a real example that I had last week. Someone actually emailed me in and said, hey, look, I really want you to mentor us in our property investment journey. I want to be financially free in the next, I think it was 6 years from memory. So quite a short time frame. And this guy is only just turned 40. So a very, very short window. And so I wanted to dig down into what that financially free actually meant, because in my mind, financially free is I don't have to go to work. In his mind, when I said, what's financially free look like to you? They want to have up to 4 holidays every year. And so that's
a lot of holidays.
That's a lot of holidays. We put a number around that. And 4 luxury vehicles. Now that was his definition of financially free. So everyone's differs on that. He still is quite happy to go to work, but there's going to be a change in direction on what their career path looks like.
Yeah, and I think the second way that the Kiwi Dream's changing is home ownership is still important. I still see a lot of Kiwis, they want to own their own home, but I think the type of home that they want to buy has changed as well. So rather than that big quarter-acre section, I'm seeing more people want still a standalone home as the ideal property to move into, but a smaller section that's much lower maintenance, because in that way, you don't have to spend all of your weekends working the land and mowing the lawns and trimming the trees and all of that, but you can spend it enjoying the property that you do have.
Yeah, we often use that term compact quality. So a bit smaller, but good quality. And certainly, I mean, even for some of the older investors that I work with who are maybe entering retirement or planning to enter retirement in the next 5 years, a lot of them are looking for, in some cases, not standalone. They might be attached or semi-detached townhouses, maybe single level if potentially they're a little bit older and mobility might become an issue in the next, say, 15 years. But they want to have a bit of a community feel. They want to be close to amenities. They actually want to be able to just, like you say, enjoy life, lock and leave as well.
I think the other thing is that houses are becoming more expensive. And so especially if you're living in one of the main centres, and New Zealand has been moving towards more urbanisation, right? When I was a kid, Auckland made up a smaller percentage of New Zealand's population compared to it does today, where we're moving towards maybe 40% of the population, where it would have been a third before. And so the trade-off is between how nice your house is and the amount of land you have. So for the same amount of money, I personally could have bought a house that was not as nice of a house and not as nice an area, but had way more land. Or I could buy further into the city in a nicer area, buy a still nice house, but much smaller land. And I'm seeing more people make that decision, that it's the quality of the house that's more important than the massive section of land. And that's the trade-off some people are making. Now, let me be clear, because sometimes when we record podcasts, do YouTube videos, all these kinds of things, people will get really grumpy and say, but I like gardening and I like a big bit of land. And that is absolutely true. We're all different. We're talking about the general trends that we're seeing, not that everybody wants this and all New Zealanders want the same thing, where actually there's a lot of diversity in terms of what everybody wants, but this is what we're seeing right now.
And then the final thing, and I think this is a big one as well, is the kind of experience piece to what we want. So I'll tell you what I mean by that. In terms of overseas trips, I guarantee you, everyone I sit with and I say, what's your goal for the future? What do you do? What does your perfect day in retirement look like? They all say, I want to travel. Now, travel might be different things for different people. It might be just travel around New Zealand in a caravan, or it might be travel first class to Europe. Now, the frequency in which people want to do that has changed quite drastically. So in our parents' generation, you might, if you were lucky, take one trip for your entire lifetime to Europe, for example, right? Because air travel was far less frequent, it was way more expensive, it was less accessible for people, and it just kind of wasn't done to the same extent as it is today. Whereas nowadays, again, get people like the investor I'm working with at the moment who are the complete other end of the spectrum, they want to do 4 trips a year. Now, again, might be 1 overseas and 3 within New Zealand, but that is a whole lot more travel than previous generations would have been interested in.
The other thing there is that we are getting wealthier over time. And because of that, travel wouldn't have been as accessible to our parents' generation 30 years ago compared to where it is now. There's probably also a certain amount of like the Instagram effect.
I was just thinking that because while I was away in Melbourne over the break, I went to Queen's Victoria Market.
Oh,
Queen
that's
Victoria
really
Market.
nice.
Really cool market,
I like
right?
that.
So got dragged along there and we're wandering around and we found this old knick-knack store, like antique thing. And so we look at some of the antique jewellery and there was this massive box of photo slides. Do you remember those?
Yeah, I do actually.
And so
is that where you put the things on like this and you flick through the photos?
No. These are the ones that you put them in an actual machine and you go click, click. Click,
Oh,
click,
and it's like a
click,
projector.
click. Yeah. And so I remember when I was a kid going around to Nick and Jenny Barlow's house and they'd been overseas to Australia and they brought back all these photo slides and they put them in and we'd sit there for the next 14 hours, we'd look at photos from their trip. Like that was the only time that you knew that your friends had gone to Australia and seen Mickey Mouse, right? And so you get really excited. Nowadays, I'm sitting at the office and I jump on Instagram to reply to some messages and oh, look at that, someone's in Bali. And then I think, oh, I wish I was in Bali. Oh, I'll just book a trip to Bali. And so now all of a sudden...
You don't just book a trip to Bali. You apply for time off like a normal person.
But you know what I mean? Now all of a sudden, it's way more visible to me that people are enjoying these experiences. And actually, I read a newspaper article it wasn't a newspaper article. I saw a TikTok, and back when TikTok was a thing, and they were talking about. Actually, maybe it was a newspaper article. It was actually something. Anyway, I read something.
I can't believe it. I read an article.
Of course, you can believe it.
Oh, that learned article actually was a TikTok.
No, actually, I think it was an article, and they were talking about how people are significant. People who spend money on experiences rather than things are significantly more happy.
But it certainly does create that desire to travel more. And so those are probably the 3 main things how we're seeing that Kiwi Dream change. It's more experience focused as opposed to material focus. We've got this big desire to travel. We're less interested in the massive plot of land. We're more interested in that compact quality. But the other big thing as well is we want financial freedom faster. So if that's how the Kiwi Dream is changing, what do New Zealanders need to do differently than our parents' generation so we can actually make it happen?
So it does require a bit of an adaptation in how you're going to actually manage your money because, again, you've got some long-term goals but also some short-term goals. So I haven't yet worked on the plan for that person that emailed me the other day, but actually he said he's going to come happy to come on the show and talk about some of the mistakes he's made in property investment because he's got some really good learning. So once I've built the plan, I'll get him on. But essentially what I'm going to do for them is I'm going to make 2 plans rather than just the normal plan. So again, if you're dealing with an older generation that says, right, I'm 55 today, I'm going to retire at 65, I'm going to live till I'm 90, I need a pot of money so I can keep spending money until I die and actually enjoy life at that stage. That's kind of the traditional retirement planning or financial modeling. For this particular person, I want 2 plans. I want a plan for, hey, when I'm 65, I'm never going to work again. I'm going to spend money till I die or whatever. I'm going to have enough assets to live on an income. But I've also got some short-term goals. I've got a 6-year goal that I want to have the 4 cars and I want to have the 4 holidays a year. Okay, what do I need to do to get to that as well? So we create the long-term plan. That's the harder one because it's a lot more money. And we close that goal, we close that wealth gap first. Once we get to that stage, we start tackling some of those shorter term goals. And it might be, hey, I'm going to have 3 rental properties that are my retirement plan, but I'm going to have 2 investment properties or some shares that are going to become my short term goals. So I'm going to sell one property in 10 years' time. That's going to fund my holidays or my private school fees or my cars. That's going to do that part of my plan. Then I'm going to sell another property, and that's going to last us from years 55 to 65, so I can work part-time, do some more charity work, all of those kind of things. So you really have to tackle it in 2 different directions because, again, that old traditional modelling doesn't work for a new way of thinking.
Well, if we think about the old way, often what would happen is you'd have your kids quite young and you'd have a lot more of them, right? So throughout your 30s and 40s, you were busy paying off your mortgage, you were making sure the kids are fed, getting them off to school, and then you get to 55, your kids are flown the nest, and so you can spend those last 10 years knuckling down, saving up that pot of money so you've got it. That was kind of the old way. But now we've got to be a bit more clever with our money, because we're having kids later and they don't leave the nest as early. They tend to stick around. And so we're putting our kids for longer. On top of that, houses are more expensive and we're buying our first properties later. So we've still got that mortgage. And so there are a lot of pressures on people to be able to make that Kiwi dream happen in a shorter time period because we've got the mortgage, we've got the mortgage and we're buying the house later and we've got the kids later and all of these pressures. And on top of that, we're trying to retire earlier. And so I think the first thing is we've got to be thinking about retirement way earlier. Because if we want that financial freedom faster, we've got to start faster and we've got to be cleverer with our money because of all of these other pressures. And because of that, we've got to do things with our money simultaneously. So the old way was pay down your mortgage, pay it down as fast as humanly possible, and then use those last 10 years to save up that pot of money.
That'd be a Martin Hawes model.
But now, today, we've got to be building assets outside of our home while we're still paying off the mortgage. Because if you pay off the mortgage and you get to 60 and then you start thinking about retirement, well, hang on, I wanted financial freedom when I was 50, not just starting to think about when I was 60. And so one of the big mindset shifts I often say to Kiwi investors is start thinking about building assets outside your main home back when you're 30, when you're 35, when you're 40, as soon as you possibly can, because that's what's going to allow you to have financial freedom. It's not just having a paid off home. It's having another pot of money, another pot of assets, whether it's houses, shares, whatever, outside your main home, because that's what's going to fund your lifestyle rather than just having no mortgage and then saying, okay, how do I fund the rest of it? And I just want to say, of course, we don't all want the same thing. So if you're watching this on YouTube, there's a comment section down below. Let us know what your Kiwi dream is as well, because it'll be interesting to see the differences between all of us. Maybe you do want that quarter-acre section, that traditional Kiwi dream, or maybe you've got something new. In fact, I was talking to Angela, who's my fiance. She's a financial advisor, and she was saying that she just met with some potential new clients who want to invest with her, and they're a young couple who have invested a lot of money, been saving up. And she said, why don't you buy your first home? And I said, we never want to buy a home. Their Kiwi dream is never owning a home at all. So they've got to save up all of their money, and that pot of money is going to fund the rent for the rest of their lives, because that way they can accumulate a lot rather than investing it in a home. So that's their Kiwi dream. So I'd love to hear what yours is. Let us know down in the comment section if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, you want to see our faces talking about this, just Google Opus Partners YouTube. It'll be the first thing that comes up. Right, let's wrap it up there. But please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It really does help us get the message out to more people. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Steve McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
We're going to be back here tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most out of the New Zealand property market. Until next time.